Hello, this is the Hybrid Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out to me. Two ways to do this is through email and then again through comments on YouTube. Now, it's greatly appreciated to give me input. So whatever input that you all have, feel free to reach out. Alright, so word of mouth is also important. Feel free to mention the Harbor Light, spread the word about me. Alright, so on to the topic of choice. So I'm going to give my thoughts about the aspects of music and how it cultivates culture. And so this is going to lead into me. On Wednesday, I'm going to talk about the aspects of punk rock, and then on the following weeks, I'm going to focus my attention on this particular book that I have about Iggy Pop and give my comments about this particular book and then my comments about Iggy Pop. So, alright, so let's get into the first installment. I'm going to give my thoughts about the aspects of music and culture. Here we go. Alright, so my thoughts about music and culture. Now, this is a companionship of what I mentioned on Sunday. Now, I mentioned this before, and I would encourage y'all to be members, because on Sundays, what I do, I give more in-depth thoughts about the aspects of perspectives that I have. So, it's entitled The Messages in a Bottle. So, check that link out for support. Alright, so, getting back to it. Alright, so I would say that music, when you think about, the clothes you wear, the things that you eat, when you think about politics, when you think about your views on interpersonal relationships, things about career choices, music is, push that back here. Overall, everything else, spirituality, how you feel about spirituality. I feel religion is a big component of a lot of things in life. That's just my take on it. So, music is aligned with those things. Now, why do I feel this way? Alright, so, that adage, as I mentioned last week when I said that there's a lot to be said about the idea that you are what you eat. And that what that means is you are what you eat. The things that you choose to put in your body is how you think and feel, right? So what you choose to listen to and how that can be an accompaniment how you see things in the world here. Now, the basics with music in itself, which is more mainstream, right? You get the pop, rock, get rap, you get country, and, you get, inspirational, which that could be religion in itself too. There's a lot and then you get world, but within there the subcategories and subgenres and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to extend out what I said on Sunday about pop. Alright, so pop is very interesting because it changes depending on the decade, okay? And then sometimes when you think about fashion in itself too, it becomes something that is circular in representation. Now, what do I mean by this? Okay, so I mentioned this before, and I proudly say that, I'm a part of the generation. I'm a 90s kid, all right? So, a lot of things that came out in the 90s, it resurfaced itself again in the way in which, pop music he's thought about and seen, right? You can see that now. You can see that in the variations in the 2010s and so forth. Okay. And so what do I mean by this? So lots of those coming out in the 90s was, especially when you get in the aspects of R&B, there was a lot of aspects of merging soulful music with music that you can dance to and feel good, where it's not just overtly a lot of beats or a lot of accompanying to somebody saying something specifically lyrical, to where that would be hip hop or some sort of rap or something, right? And then also with the aspects with pop, you got a lot of vocalization and harmony too, to where you saw these boy bands, and then you saw girl bands, and then you saw solo singers, and then it was a mixture in which it was pronounced that vocally there's different ranges in the way singers were representing themselves. And so that changes a lot, again, when you think about the decades. Okay, so going back, let's go back into talking about my generation in the 90s here. That was a time in which, on the extenuation in which I was talking about on Sunday, where the 90s was a really interesting time, because that was another round of a decade where it was encouraged for different types of singers to come to arena and express and say and represent the way pop could be. A really good, I think what merges this together is two, what I would say, three bands, right? Blues Travelers, let me see, let me get this in my mind. The Bare Naked Ladies and Dave Matthews Band. Now, I picked these three bands because these guys were, in other decades, they'd probably be more considered, depending on the type of time in the decade, more progressive blues, I guess, maybe more southern rock, I don't know, maybe. But in the 90s, it was interesting because they were merging those things to where they became more pop influence, sort of, in that arena, to where what you think about pop was changing. So what do I mean by this? I say, so, okay, let's take a step back with the Blues Traveler. What particularly, now this is from my perspective, but there's genres. Now, particularly popular music is what it is, music that reaches the masses. And so the Blues Traveler in the 90s was one of those bands that reaches the masses. Why? And then Hootie and the Blowfish, Hootie and the Blowfish, bands like that. And then, as I mentioned, they reached the masses because of the way in which the sound and the way in which they represented themselves had mass appeal to a lot of people. but they were using, they were and are considered a lot of different subgenres within itself because of the way in which the harmony that they have with the with the blues traveler. That within itself, blues, you got the harmonica, you got that kind of soulful accompaniment, and in the way they're singing. And then the lead singer, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. He wasn't really what you would equate a pop singer, especially a male, to look, because particularly when you get with pop, when you think about pop singers, they're very youthful oriented and very attractive looking. Well in shape, everything is put together quite well. He was not. And he just looked like, maybe just, just an average run-of-the-mill person. And he was overweight, and that's, unfortunately, was one of those things that a lot of times takes a lot of people in the entertainment business, especially when you think about comedians and so. But he was just not, he didn't fit that bill with what you typically thought about when you say, okay, he's a pop musician, right? And so we move into Bare Naked Ladies. Bare Naked Ladies were another interesting band because they were changing the way in which they were on the cusp of that New Jack R&B swing sort of style, but they made it more mass appealing. Okay, so I was in here recording. I'm fixing to go outside. Alright, so my husband, he works from home there. So I'm going to step outside for a minute. So, he's getting prepared there. Alright, so as I was mentioning, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'll be right back. Okay, as I was mentioning, alright, so they were, there was other R&B bands that was specifically focusing in, on the soul end of it, but Bare Naked Ladies used rock, the aspects of accompanying it with rock and pop and all these different elements to where it became mass appealing. Now, so did Hootie and the Blowfish. Now, they were this band was particularly, a band that was merging the means too with soul and pop to where it was mass appeal, to where it wasn't specifically focusing in on the soul element of something. And so Mariah Carey and herself too, and let me see, there's so many different artists. When you get with the Alanis Morissette, you get with a band like Garbage within itself. I had, unfortunately, the way with Hush, Manny. Shh. Manny! Manny! Alright, so you hear a dog in the background. That's our dog. So, Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, you get 311, you get Soundgarden, you get Candlebox, you get Stone Temple Pilots. Now all these bands came out in the 90s when I was growing up, and then they had so many different variations of sound to where they could fit all these categories to where they set up culture. Specifically, when you get in the aspects, so a lot of times when you think about pretending on a decade, 90s gets that connotation of, oh, that was the decade of grunge. Now what is grunge, right? Now I talked about this earlier in my podcast, earlier in the years of my podcast, and grunge was this whole movement to where musicians, particularly when you get into the Seattle, Washington scene, there's a lot of young artists flocking there, wanting to get counterculture that saying, which started in the 80s and then really defining itself in the early 90s to where rock doesn't isn't where it should be. When we get into they were coming off the aspects of in the 80s, like glam, pop stylish rock to where come here. Let me take him in because it's a little bit much right now. Alright, so bands like Poison, bands like I'm trying to think why is it failing me to not Def Leppard, the list goes on. Those bands were specifically set up into where they were pretty boy sort of rock mentality, right? To where, they kind of had, a negative connotation in the aspects of with the way in which rock elements are and with the way in which rock should be seen to, how other people view rock with the aspects of not speaking truth, because most of the elements of rock is supposed to be in an arena where it's welcome, that where they make a lot of commentary about the reality of situations of life. Van Halen touched on stuff like that from time to time, but they were very interesting in the evolution in which Van Halen was very interested in the evolution in which they went in with their band, because they were in that arena of rock where I guess you could say that with glam rock, but they reached different elements and sounds and to where they were able to touch on so many decades and be relevant, which is really hard to do. And so, getting back to what I said about grunge, grunge in itself is the aspects of being destructive, for the most part, in which you represent music. And so there was a lot of bands who were coming out, who did come out, and who were showing you about the aspects of just being, I'm this singer, or I'm this band who stripped down. There's no theatrics. It's just me singing, telling you how I think the world is, right? And so it got so much attention to where fashion took notice of it, right? The fashion world took notice of it, and you saw people changing their attires in which they were dressing, where, baggy stuff, holes in the jeans, That was something that was kind of showing itself in the 80s, but it was more pronounced in the 90s. You have ratty t-shirts, you have the cardigans wearing stuff like that. Common sense would say that's a Seattle thing, because Washington is more up north. So yeah, you would see people wearing that. People flocking to coffee houses. It was a thing where that's associated with the aspects of the culture of the 90s. Being in a coffee house, seeing musicians come sing and be very more intimate with their audience base. And then so you got MTV Plugs took notice of. That's why I think, from my point of view, which is kind of common sense to say that. But y'all, fill me in if it's something else that you know about it that you want to make comments about. MTV Plugs, that's why that show was a thing, because where you could see the artist that was showcased being very with the intention was that's just the artist showcasing their talent, and they're showing you the gifts that they have to sing and to move you. And that is the pieces that should be gathered a lot about the aspects of music within itself, and why I greatly have a lot of admiration for music. Now, music in itself transcends a lot of times what mere communication cannot, sometimes fails to. Now, let's say you have disagreements about something, or let's say you experience something, right, that you don't really, sometimes it fails you being able to express that with purely communicating it, right? Some people are innate to tell and express things quite well, because they either naturally know how to communicate well, or it took them a lot of time in order to develop that skill, because that with is in itself to be able to understand and express yourself quite well, and for other people to be able to understand what you're saying, that takes a lot of talent. That's a very fundamental skill to have in life, and that's a very important skill to have in life. Now, when a musician really does their job quite well, it can up the ante, because it's the way in which the lyrics can be seen and heard and thought. It can express a meaning to where it can help people see things to where they never thought about before, and say, I wonder where that person was feeling. And I will give a good example of this to The Wedding Singer. And I think it's still on Peacock if y'all don't have it, or if y'all are interested in watching it. It's funny. It's really funny. It's very interesting, because Adam Sandler said he in himself, which is something about the aspects of the way you take things in life, and the aspects of the influence of music, and how music shapes things and careers and everything else. Alright, so Adam Sandler. Alright, so he in himself, he was, in his career, he was going to be a musician, particularly, if I'm not mistaken, an opera singer or something like that. But he didn't have the look, which meant that he wasn't attractive enough, which is weird. It's like, shouldn't your talent, way out that, yeah, but I digress, okay? And so, he took it for what it was, and he went into being a comedian. It worked for him, and then he's an actor. But I would say that he has a lot. He's more than just a person who is funny. He's actually can be a serious, you would say, a serious actor too, because he showcased that in different movies that he has that range, which is really good. And then Jim Carrey's one of those where he's an actor, but he is a talented comedian as well. Okay, so there's that. So there's one scene in The Wedding Singer where Adam Sandler is saying, well, Drew Barrymore is asking him, and she said, well, what was your thought process for wanting to be a singer? He said, well, I really wanted to be a songwriter. That's what I was singing about. And so the whole reason why is, when people hear the song on and radio or what have you, and they sit back and they have that aspects of, oh, I wonder what that person was experiencing, thinking about when they wrote that song. That says a lot. It says how powerful and how music can really shape and the manners and means in which people see and view things, and how they place that value on culture. Alright, so that's all I got for this part of the installment of giving my thoughts about culture and how the music and how it shapes culture. Alright, so on Wednesday I'm going to focus more into the aspects of punk rock, and then I'm going to get into aspects of talking more about Iggy Pop, and then the contributions of that, of him and himself, and the aspects of that. And then on the following weeks, I'm going to talk about the specific book that I have about him. Alright, with that said, hey, you want to extend this conversation, feel free to do this. Best way to do this is through email, and again through YouTube. Alright, I appreciate all of y'all. This reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Alright, so tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye bye for now.